I'm blessed. I have nothing else to say.
A federal jury finds former City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby guilty of perjury. A look at the factors that led to the verdict, the prison time she could see, and the legal battle still looming. Parents across Maryland are terrified of the violence gripping their children and pleading for change. New tonight, we press city and state leaders on what they're doing to address the crisis right now and why tough talk hasn't translated into action.
What do you say to those parents who are concerned about this recidivism in DJS?
A vigil for victims held hostage in Israel.
Hamas must release the hostages now.
Their powerful messages as communities pray for their loved ones' safe return.
Live from WBFF in Baltimore, this is Fox 45 News at 10.
Former City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby is guilty of 2 counts of perjury. Tonight, she's waiting to learn her sentence.
She was indicted in January of last year on 4 federal charges. Mosby still faces a trial for 2 counts of making false statements on loan applications. Good evening, I'm Kai Jackson.
And I'm Mary Bubala. Fox 45 News has covered every step of this case since news of the indictment broke, and our coverage continues tonight.
Attorney Jeremy Eldridge is joining us tonight with expert analysis of today's proceeding and what's still to come. We begin, though, with Mackenzie Frost at the federal courthouse in Greenbelt with the verdict.
After 3 days of trial, 6.5 hours of deliberations, a jury finding Baltimore City's former top prosecutor Marilyn Mosby guilty in federal court.
I'm blessed. I'm blessed. I have nothing else to say.
Marilyn Mosby walking out of the federal courthouse in Greenbelt to a sea of reporters after being convicted on 2 perjury charges. Mosby only repeating a familiar phrase she said throughout the trial. Her public defender, James Wida, staying silent.
We still have 2 counts pending, so we'll be doing a press release, but that's all.
Meanwhile, federal prosecutors walking away with a win, but not answering questions. Mosby's perjury charges hinging on her travel businesses, Mahogany Elite. She claimed to have suffered a financial hardship and withdrew money from her city retirement account without paying a penalty. Prosecutors playing audio recordings.
Good morning, David. I have a question about my account.
Of Mosby calling the bank multiple times, asking questions about making withdrawals from her account.
Is there any way for me to withdraw the funds?
In May and again in December.
I need to figure out a way that I can get the money.
An FBI forensic accountant detailing Mosby's financial records, noting her spending habits, the lack of Mahogany Elite expenses, and telling the jury Mosby made more money in 2020 when she claimed financial hardship than she did in 2019. On the 3rd day of trial, Mosby electing not to testify. While her defense team tried to argue the pandemic crashed her plans to launch the travel business, the jury not buying it.
I'm blessed. I have nothing else to say.
Convicting former Baltimore City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby of perjury after less than a full day of deliberations. Now Mosby awaits sentencing, which is yet to be scheduled. She faces up to 5 years in prison for each perjury count. But Marilyn Mosby's legal troubles are not over. She still faces 2 federal mortgage fraud charges stemming from those 2 Florida vacation homes, and that trial has yet to be scheduled. We're outside the federal courthouse in Greenbelt. Mackenzie Frost, Fox 45 News.
The guilty verdict comes 665 days after Mosby was first indicted on January 13th of 2022. Mosby addressed the media the following day, proclaiming her innocence.
I also need citizens who I am blessed to serve to know that I am innocent of the charges that have been levied against me, and I intend to fight.
Mosby has maintained her innocence over the past 2 years. The trial was supposed to take place in May of 2022, but it was postponed to September of 2022. In September, the trial was delayed again, this time just days before it was set to start. At that time, the trial was set for March of 2023. The delays came despite Mosby's insistence that she wanted a speedy trial.
What I'm asking for is that I be tried right now.
Oh, we're pushing for trial.
Because I know that I'm innocent. So I'm ready to go to trial tomorrow.
In 70 days.
She said, like, try me as soon as possible, and that's what they're looking to do.
Put this on trial right now so I can prove my innocence.
In January of this year, Mosby's entire defense team asked to withdraw from her case, citing scheduling conflicts. The judge allowed them to leave, and Mosby was appointed public defenders. In February, the trial was delayed for a 3rd time to allow Mosby's public defenders to get up to speed on the case. The trial started a little over a week ago with jury selection October 31st.
Throughout the legal process, Mosby and her defense team often claimed the case was a result of racist prosecution. In February of 2022, her defense team filed a motion to dismiss the case because they claimed it was racially motivated.
Marilyn Mosby is not the only one that's going to be on trial. The U.S. Attorney's Office for Maryland is going to be on trial. The criminal justice system and its attacks on black female progressive prosecutors.
The jury that convicted Mosby today is made up of both men and women of different races.
And we want to bring in defense attorney Jeremy Eldridge right now with Ian Lawyers. Jeremy, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Jeremy, what does today's verdict say about Ms. Mosby's claims, past claims of racist prosecution?
Well, I think that the claims of whether it was targeted, whether it was racist, or selective prosecution, I think those arguments fell on deaf ears. And it's really one very simple reason. Marilyn Mosby created pre-trial, whether it tainted the jury or not, this idea that she was going to come in, she was going to prove her innocence. And that led a lot of people, whether they're attorneys, members of the public, and possibly the jurors, to think that she was going to testify, albeit it's a constitutional right to not testify. When you create this persona publicly of let me get into court, let me say my piece, and let me prove my innocence, not only are you shifting the burden away from the prosecution, which is her fault, but I think that the jurors wanted to hear her testify, and she chose not to.
And Jeremy, as Mackenzie brought up, Mosby is still facing another trial. Prosecutors say she lied about a tax lien on her home, on mortgage applications for 2 homes in Florida. That trial has not been scheduled yet. How do you see it playing out?
Well, first, the real question, I think, is will we see a superseding indictment? Are we going to see a new set of charges relating to some of the tax issues that she wasn't even charged with? So is the current state of the indictment that she's facing in the second trial, is that character of that going to change? Secondly, now we know she didn't testify in the first trial where she said she was going to testify. And in fact, that's why the trials were severed. So are we going to see Marilyn testify in this trial? Are we going to see the government change its case a little bit now that they know how she plans to present some of the evidence against her? And lastly, are we going to see the city council president, Nick Mosby, charged? And will that affect his choice to testify if he's called in a witness in the second case?
Interesting questions there. And Jeremy, when it comes to today's verdict, how might the judge decide this sentence, and what are the federal parameters, the guidelines for sentencing?
The federal sentencing guidelines, which are congressionally mandated and federally drawn up, they allow for both sides. And it's incredibly numerical. I hate to start there, no different than the state sentencing guidelines. But on the federal side, they're going to be sentencing memorandum that are filed on by both sides. They're going to have the character and background of Marilyn Mosby. There could be a lot of character letters. And I think we've seen this before with the pleas of Catherine Pugh and Darrell D'Souza, the former police commissioner, where members of the community are going to come forward. They're going to speak on her behalf. And even if her sentencing guidelines are 15 to 21 or 18 to 24, depending on how they're calculated, what you're actually going to see is Marilyn going forth and saying, well, look, what is the point of incarcerating me? There are what are called variances or downward departures that she could argue to try to convince the judge that although the sentencing guidelines call for a sentence between these 2-month periods, that maybe it's not deserving. And the government could say quite the contrary. You know what? You didn't plead guilty. You had a trial. And because of some other reasons, you should be sentenced above that.
All right, we'll see what happens in the days ahead. Defense attorney Jeremy Eldridge, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We appreciate it.
Have a good evening.
U.S. Attorney for Maryland Eric Barron also reacted to the jury's decision in a statement saying, quote, "We respect the jury's verdict and remain steadfastly committed to our mission to uphold the rule of law, keep our country safe, protect the civil rights of all Americans, and safeguard public property." Fox 45 News pressed Governor Wes Moore and Baltimore Mayor Brandon Scott about the verdict this afternoon. We'll have their responses coming up at 10:30.
Today's verdict is just the latest chapter in Mosby's history of controversies. She first made national headlines months after she took office in 2015 when she indicted 6 Baltimore City police officers in the death of Freddie Gray. While some praised her decision, others criticized the indictments, calling them a reckless rush to judgment. Another controversy involved her frequent out-of-town travel. Although she maintained she did nothing wrong, she asked City Inspector General Isabel Cumming to investigate. The IG found Mosby spent 85 days out of office in 2018 through 2019 and did not get approval for 15 trips. 1 month after that finding in March of 2021, Marilyn Mosby stopped enforcing what she calls low-level crimes. And we've seen a number of questionable plea deals come from Mosby's office, including the case of convicted arsonist Luther Trent. He was released on a plea deal after serving less than 6 months in jail. Federal authorities later sentenced him to 12 years in prison. Mosby was voted out of office 1 year ago.
Fox 45 News has been following the Mosby case since the beginning. We'll follow it and bring you complete coverage on air and online. You can find all of our reporting on our website, foxbaltimore.com.
Well, another hearing on juvenile justice has come and gone in Annapolis, with lawmakers at a stalemate over how to handle youth crime.
But many are crying out for help right now and questioning if there's time to wait. Even if the state legislature passes a juvenile crime bill in January, it may be months until Marylanders see change.
It's not just getting a law passed, it's getting enacted, signed in the law, and then the process of the law taking place and being enforced.
It's so bad that you even have the parents of the juveniles in question starting to tell us, we have no options. We need you to detain our kids so we have some kind of control here.
Governor Wes Moore and Mayor Brandon Scott saying it's important to hold young people accountable in Baltimore and across the state, but neither offering specifics on the changes they want to see in Annapolis.
Because our parents do deserve more, and we have to make sure there's greater levels of accountability.
We have to build a system that works, and I know that that'll be addressed in the General Assembly.
Well, tonight, our Fox 45 News team is pressing some of the state's top leaders on why they aren't taking action now.
We begin with Keith Daniels and the questions for Governor Moore and Mayor Scott about the next steps following Wednesday's hearing. Keith?
Well, Kai and Mary, it's a familiar message coming from parents across the state. They're concerned about their children's criminal activity with seemingly, in some cases, no accountability. And tonight, we caught up with the governor and mayor to press the point. It's an issue that's happening across Maryland. The recent string of troubling incidents involving juvenile offenders, with parents expressing frustration over their children's criminal behavior, and the juvenile justice system that seemingly serves with no consequences for repeat juvenile offenders. Tonight, at an event in downtown Baltimore, pressing Mayor Brandon Scott and Governor Wes Moore over those parents' concerns. The mayor first with a firm directive to parents.
First, we need all parents and everybody to be parenting their children first and foremost.
And the governor.
Well, I say to the parents who are watching their children going through challenges is that their frustration is right, and we have to make sure there's greater levels of accountability.
As you heard from me, Keith, I've been talking about this before it was popular, that we have to build a system of accountability, working with our partners in the state and the governor, now that we actually have a governor that wants to work with the city.
Some parents continuing to come to Fox 45 News, calling for their own children to be held accountable when they're accused of committing crimes. One father last month with concern over his 16-year-old son caught trying to steal a motorcycle after already being put on probation for a stolen car last year.
To this day, I'm still fighting, trying to get him help. And everybody's like, oh, well, just deal with it. What, deal with his death?
And her mother this week spoke out about her 14-year-old son, allegedly caught on camera last week, accused of the assault and robbery of a woman in Butchers Hill. The boy arrested, taken to the Baltimore Juvenile Services Center, but released within hours without charges.
I don't know, I don't know what to do with him. At this point, I'm trying to get the help that he needs. Gotta keep working on him.
That mother working on her son's circumstance amid the call for city and state leaders to address the situation, including a push for state lawmakers to act with more urgency. What about a call for lawmakers to do something now to stiffen the penalties for young people?
I think that listen, Keith, I've been very clear about this before. We have to build a system that works, right? We know that the old system that treated young people just like adults didn't work. It didn't make us safer. We have to build a system that works, and I know that that'll be addressed in the General Assembly.
Yes, sir. Governor, what am I calling for that special session?
Keith, come on. Keith, come on.
Thank you, Governor. Appreciate it. Well, the governor and mayor both call it a critical need to hold younger offenders accountable, but neither offering specifics on the changes they want to see in Annapolis. We're live tonight. Keith Daniels, Fox 45 News.
Keith, thank you. There's frustration with the state's youth crime laws. Montgomery County Police arrested a 13-year-old after he was seen on video allegedly shooting at a car passing through an apartment complex parking lot in Silver Spring. Montgomery County Police say it's hard to hold juveniles accountable.
Most of our offenders now we're finding are juveniles, and we can't interrogate them anymore with the Juvenile Act. So, you know, they're in the system and they're back on the street. They're repeat offenders.
The Bladensburg police chief in Prince George's County. Police are still looking for at least 3 other teen suspects in that shooting. In Baltimore City, a 12 and 14-year-old were arrested, accused of an assault and attempted car theft in Butchers Hill. They were released to their parents after a call from DJS 2 hours later. That assault prompted a firm letter from City Councilman Zeke Cohen to Baltimore Police and the Department of Juvenile Services. Cohen calls the investigation an operational failure.
4 state lawmakers signed off on that letter, including Senate President Bill Ferguson. Fox 45's Jeff Abel joins us live with our questions for the Senate President about addressing juvenile violence. Jeff?
Well, you'll be hard-pressed to find anyone in Annapolis willing to take responsibility for this crisis. While they have been holding hearings, no one has been holding a vote.
The attack on a Butchers Hill woman has fueled the fiery outrage that there's little justice in the juvenile justice system. Minutes after this beating, police arrested a 12 and 14-year-old. And 2 hours later, the state sent them home.
Yeah, I'm pissed.
The case has prompted outrage from the victim and finger-pointing from politicians.
The police department, the Department of Juvenile Services need to be on the same page.
The case has also prompted this letter to the DJS director and city police condemning the suspect's release. One of the 4 authors was Senate President Bill Ferguson, who's been under fire for failing to act on the juvenile crime crisis.
And there's no accountability whatsoever.
This week, former Senator Jim Brochin, who sat on the Senate's Judicial Proceedings Committee for 14 years, was critical of the state's seemingly passive approach toward reforming the broken system.
This is unacceptable. We would have had a hearing and brought the Secretary of the Department of Juvenile Services in, okay? We all would have called for it and said, explain this, explain how he got let out, and explain the 14-year-old, and explain how this isn't going to happen again.
In an email to the Senate president today, we questioned the senator, asking, why did you submit a letter scolding city police and DJS when your office hasn't taken official action to hold juveniles accountable? Do you plan to hold them accountable? What is your plan to address the juvenile crime crisis? Do you believe in tougher penalties to hold juveniles accountable? And are you planning to call a special session to address juvenile crime? So far, neither the senator nor his office has responded.
They all run away because the political capital to roll up your sleeves and confront the problem is vast, and it has to do with problem solving.
For now, the problem remains unsolved. The attacks keep growing, the cars keep vanishing, juveniles keep walking, and lawmakers keep failing to act.
Under these circumstances, this isn't the state that you want to live in.
When the legislature does open in January, Brochin says it is possible to have emergency legislation dealing with juvenile justice signed and taking effect by the time the legislature ends in April. We're live tonight. Jeff Abel, Fox 45 News.
Jeff, thanks. We have heard from more than a dozen prosecutors across the state saying their hands are tied by the juvenile justice laws in place right now. They represent more than 5 million people, nearly 90% of the state's population.
They know that, nothing's really going to happen to them if they keep their crime in a certain limit of types of crime.
They come in, we can't detain them, they're back in the community the next day.
We all have the same sad song, no matter where we are in the state.
And that brings us to our question of the day. Do you think the General Assembly has the best interests of voters or criminals in mind? So far, 96% of those who voted say criminals. You can make your voice heard by going to foxbaltimore.com/vote.
And in our first forecast, we are tracking the next weather maker. Take a look at the rain that's moving toward us. Bowling Green to Lexington, Kentucky, after highs nearing records today at 77 degrees, just 1 degree off records. We're hard pressed to even get out of the low 50s tomorrow. Now, tonight, not a whole lot of rain until maybe late night. We'll start seeing that disturbance roll in by about 7 a.m. And look at the on and off rain through about 9:15, so potentially ending that morning commute kind of wet. And that's going to go all the way through noon, maybe even a little patch of heavier rain just south of Baltimore. Kind of a messy day, and it's going to be cool, too. Even as you pick up the kids at the bus stop, still 2:45 p.m., dealing with more on and off rain. I'm going to let you know when the rain's going to end and what comes behind it over the weekend. That's coming up in my full Weather Authority forecast.
And coming up on Fox 45 News at 10, a somber anniversary for Jews across the world, commemorating Kristallnacht as the war with Hamas continues in their homeland. Baltimore's tribute to lives lost as we hear from one woman who witnessed the Hamas attack firsthand. An emotional gun violence PSA now being broadcast across Maryland TVs and phones. Why those who appeared in the message say their roles reflect their reality. And a man arrested for using a forklift to steal an ATM in Canton slips out of handcuffs and goes on the run. How the effort to track him down is getting more complicated on tonight's Maryland's Most Wanted. West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin will not seek re-election next year. The Democrat occupies a swing seat in West Virginia, creating an opportunity for Republicans to pick up a seat next year. Democrats currently have a 51-49 majority. Manchin says he'll travel the country to gauge interest in a movement to bring moderate Americans together. He's also considering a third-party presidential run.
GOP presidential frontrunner Donald Trump skipped out on another debate, and other candidates saw his absence as an opportunity. They took aim at poor results for Republicans in Tuesday night's elections, saying it's time for the party to see some change at the top.
He said Republicans were going to get tired of winning. Well, we saw last night, I'm sick of Republicans losing.
Now I am upset about what happened last night. We've become a party of losers.
Well, candidates Vivek Ramaswamy and former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley clashed.
In the last debate, she made fun of me for actually joining TikTok while her own daughter was actually using the app.
Leave my daughter out of your voice.
Here's the truth.
You're just
the easy answer.
Well, Trump held a separate campaign event nearby. He still has a comfortable lead, polling at about 40% higher than any other candidate.
Ahead at 10:30, the Baltimore area Jewish community calls for hostages being held by Hamas to be released during a vigil at City Hall. Why tonight's ceremony is about more than just the ongoing war.
An ATM heist turns into a chase and ends in an arrest, but the suspect manages to break free from the police station. I'm Alexa Ashwell. The search for this man coming up on Maryland's Most Wanted.
Governor Wes Moore and Baltimore Mayor Brandon Scott addressing today's guilty verdict in the federal trial of former Baltimore City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby.
She was convicted on 2 counts of perjury by a federal jury in Greenbelt after a few hours of deliberation.
You know, no matter where you fall in this situation, this is a difficult day for the city of Baltimore, and I'm praying for her children because I know how difficult this must be for them.
The jury has spoken.
Mosby faces up to 5 years in prison for each perjury charge. A sentencing date has not yet been set. Her defense team has the option to appeal, but neither Mosby nor her lawyers commented on questions about that.
Today's verdict is separate from the two other federal charges Ms. Mosby faces for making false statements on a loan application. There will be a separate trial for that. Fox 45 News will follow this developing story. Download the Fox 45 News app and turn on notifications to get breaking developments.
Fighting is escalating in the Middle East as the U.S. launched airstrikes against Syria this afternoon in retaliation of attacks on Americans overseas. This comes as Israel is agreeing to 4-hour pauses in fighting every day to allow civilians to flee Gaza. President Biden had been pushing for a 3-day pause before the U.S. and Israel settled on 4-hour periods.
Tonight, the Israeli government is demanding explanations from 4 media outlets regarding a report that alleges Hamas warned some photographers about the initial attack on Israel. CNN says it has cut ties with one of the photographers named in the report, even though it had no reason to doubt the journalistic accuracy of his work. AP and Reuters both deny having any prior knowledge of the attack. Nearly 200 hostages are still being held by Hamas, including several Americans. Tonight, calls are growing louder to bring them home.
We have team coverage as Fox 45's Vincent Hill reports from a pro-Israel rally at City Hall. But we begin with national correspondent Angela Brown, who spoke to some family members of those hostages.
I talked to Liron Berman, his brothers taken by Hamas. He wants to make sure their faces are not forgotten and the U.S. takes action.
Ziv on the bottom is the older of the two by 2 minutes, and Gali on top.
Gali and Ziv Berman, twins, inseparable, a shared love of European football and a good beer with their big brother Liron.
They are working and traveling and having fun.
They lived in Kibbutz Faraza in Israel, near the Gaza border. Liron describes life there like this.
It was 98% paradise and 2% hell.
Hell came October 7th. Hamas terrorists storming over the Gaza border.
The destruction, the blood everywhere.
Killing and kidnapping Israelis.
They were in the same neighborhood, not in the same safe room when they are abducted. But the sad reality is that kidnapped, it's better than funerals.
Liron and other family members of hostages are in D.C., putting pressure on U.S. lawmakers to do more. Doris Lieber's son, Guy, also taken.
We don't have a list of the hostages. We don't know their condition. I don't have anything. So I need your help.
Liron says lawmakers are listening.
We got very sympathetic from both parties. Both are telling us that they will do whatever they can.
The brothers' last contact? A message to their mom, October 7th, the day of the horrific attack. Liron was planning to visit that day. So you could have been there that day?
I was supposed to be there. Me and my family.
Liron is hoping his brothers are still together, imagining the moment they are reunited.
It will be the happiest day of my life. More than my wedding, more than the birth of my kids. It's like seeing them alive and together again. It will be the happiest day of my life.
Some families want the U.S. to put more pressure on Middle Eastern countries to release the hostages. Keep in mind, over 200 people were taken over 30 days ago. Reporting in Washington, D.C., I'm Angela Brown.
In Baltimore, the Jewish community is holding a vigil for the Hamas captives in Israel. Fox 45's Vincent Hill was at City Hall for a vigil. Vincent?
Yeah, Kai, earlier tonight, this lawn was full of flyers just like this of people assumingly kidnapped by Hamas. And tonight, the Jewish community of Baltimore demanding their release. On the 85th anniversary of Kristallnacht, or the Night of the Broken Glass.
It was the start of the Holocaust, and the world was silent.
The night the Nazis launched an attack on the Jews in Germany.
We are now here remembering what happened just 35 days ago to our brothers and sisters.
Hannah Perry, 79, Miriam.
Here at City Hall, a gathering a month after the Hamas attacks on Israel.
Nutawari Munkan, 35.
Honoring those killed and praying for the release of the 240 hostages still being held captive by Hamas.
Eitan Yahalomi, 12, near Oz.
And the God of our fathers, that you strengthen and preserve our brothers, the house of Israel, the captives for whom we pray.
Lanterns lighting up the names.
Emily Hand
9 years old. Ariel Cunyo, 26 years old.
And a proclamation from City Council President Nick Mosby, read by Councilman Isaac Yitzi Slifer.
For its abductions, I call on Hamas to provide medical care, release, and safe return of all hostages.
Despite the support of city officials.
It's a scary thing to be a Jew in America today.
What's going on today in Israel? A daily reminder for Harry Kozlowski about history.
Absolutely has repeated itself. Back at the time of Kristallnacht, both my parents were Holocaust survivors, so that's embedded into my memory. It's embedded into my soul.
Samar Fand El Talaika, 22.
Kozlowski, heartbroken by what he says he witnesses every day.
All you have to do every day is watch the anti-Semitism going on in universities in particular.
Karina Aryev, 19 years old. Ella Eliakim, 8 years old. Bring them home.
Rachel Groner was in Israel when the Hamas attacks began, making it out after 5 weeks.
It's hard to wrap your head around so many people being stolen from their homes or from a music concert.
Groner considers herself lucky to have escaped the grips of Hamas, but feels for those still waiting for their loved ones to be freed.
And it's been 30 days. Imagine your 9-month-old, imagine your grandmother, imagine your mother, imagine your dad underground all this time, and we know nothing about them, and it's inhuman.
Hamza Al-Ziadana, 22, Rahat.
And next Tuesday, the Jewish community here in Baltimore plans to take a trip to the nation's capital, demanding the release of those hostages. At City Hall, Vincent Hill, Fox 45 News.
Vincent, thank you. Well, Arab countries have given at least $8 billion to elite American universities over the past few decades, according to recent reports. Some argue those funds could be contributing to a lack of pushback on anti-Israel rallies on those campuses. The American-Israeli Cooperative Enterprise reports Cornell University received $1.5 billion. Georgetown and Northwestern universities received more than $500 million, and Harvard University received just under $200 million from countries like Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait. One political scientist says these gifts are being used to buy influence on college campuses.
Well, when you're talking about tens of billions of dollars transferring hands from foreign governments over to the United States, there's little doubt that this money is designed to buy influence. There has to be strings attached, and that's what we think is going on. What is being taught to students on these campuses? And unfortunately, we're seeing some anti-Israel, anti-Semitic propaganda that's being pushed to the student body. And it's not a surprise that we're seeing these anti-Israel, pro-Hamas protests on college campuses throughout the country.
The group also red-flagged Russia, China, and Qatar as countries where many donations were anonymous, leading to more alarm.
There have been more than 9,600 auto thefts in Baltimore this year, more than triple the level this time last year. That alarming rise is prompting a city council hearing this week to address the crisis. And now some Ravens fans are among the city's most recent victims. A woman from Anne Arundel County says she and her father parked in an industrial part of South Baltimore to go to a game last Sunday, but when they returned, her father's Hyundai was gone.
You don't really expect to come out, your whole car be gone. Definitely pay to park in a lot that's going to be like babysat by the people that you're paying, because there's, no matter where you park, it's not safe anymore.
Well, the family shared this photo near where the car was stolen as another couple sitting in the grass looks at an SUV with its window busted out. Police confirmed a Hyundai was reported stolen from this block on Sunday. Police also say a second car, a Kia Sorento, was damaged on the block in an attempted car theft.
Police say more than 38% of those arrested for car theft are juveniles, many of them arrested multiple times for the same crime. But only 2/3 of those suspects are reported to the Department of Juvenile Services, and only 5% end up serving time in a DJS facility. Concerned Baltimore residents telling the city council they fear for their safety.
My community has been hit so hard from 2020 up until now with teenagers going crazy, and no one has done anything about them.
My biggest fear is being carjacked with my children in the car. And what am I supposed to do when 6 to 8 youth surround my car What am I supposed to do? I can't fight back. What if they shoot me? What if they hurt me? What are my children supposed to do? We need to stop this and hold these kids accountable.
That brings us to our question of the day. Should Maryland lawmakers pass mandatory minimum sentences for all car thefts? So far, 91% of those who voted say yes. You can weigh in by going to foxbaltimore.com/vote. Just click on the Pulse tab.
Hey, Tosh. I'm not gonna be home, all right?
But what about the keys? I can't get in.
Look, it ain't like that, all right?
When are you coming back?
In charge right now, Tasha.
I don't understand.
Just feed my birds for me, all right? Later, Tasha.
T.
Tasha, will you come with me, please?
An emotional gun violence public service announcement now playing on TVs and phones across Maryland. The PSA aims to show the impact violence can have on young people and their families. U.S. Attorney for Maryland Eric Barron made the PSA in collaboration with ROCA, a nonprofit offering wraparound services for at-risk youth.
You don't get to say goodbye to your loved ones if they are murdered. We need to really get a deeper understanding of what violence looks like.
One murder is too many. The more we raise awareness of how this impacts, the greater chance we have to bring change.
Well, you can find a link to the video in its entirety right now on our website, foxbaltimore.com. Still ahead, forklifts and flatbeds leading police to an ATM theft suspect, how he was able to escape custody while at the police station and the efforts to track him down.